Oh, John, thank you for coming back to the channel.
Hey,
We
thanks for having me.
so we're to remind the audience, we're live streaming on YouTube and also simulcasting on X Spaces. If you have a question, please type in the chat box your question or ask for the mic on X Spaces and we'll take all your questions. We prefer an interactive audience, so this show is for the audience, so please ask the questions. And in addition, I have two additional channels that this recording will be on. So please subscribe to all the channels. The links will be in the description of this video. So please subscribe and help support the work by clicking the link to John's website to sign up for his periodical and also sign up for reading. We will remind the audience on what that entails. But as we continue, thank you for joining, John, and
Yeah.
how's things going?
Well, the one thing I've noticed of late that maybe could apply to us as well is a lot of my sources online have, including some of my best sources, are there must be something going on in YouTube or something that's causing it. But they say if you want to support and get more eyeballs and interest to our show, to Paul Cottrell's show, just click the like button at the bottom right now, and that will actually tell the YouTube or whatever systems you're watching this on, it'll stimulate them to open it up to more people. So that's what I always do. I can't pay for a lot of the people. I watch hundreds of sources, so I'm always clicking the button to make sure they get more eyeballs and interest. So I would say to all of you who are watching right now, click the like button, and that would help us a lot to wake up the system to bring more people in.
Good idea. So, John, the news lately. There's obviously the ceasefire. There's also, it looks like there's a pause with the Tomahawk missiles going to Ukraine that I noticed.
Yeah.
Um, then there's the No Kings,
Yes.
riot or
Yeah.
protest.
Protests across the United States of
Right.
people uh, we don't have kings in the United States. We have elected presidents.
Right. And then the shutdown that's going on in the United States. Also, even the debt crisis that's starting to loom in the UK and in France.
In France, yes.
There's political instability in France, obviously.
Well, yes, I mean the the French government is trying somehow to limp along, but it could very well be that Macron will not finish his presidency because they're getting just closer and closer to a complete no confidence. Now, of course, he could do something that would really anger his people and say, "Well, I won't vote for a no confidence. I won't open it up," And he's done that before, and he's becoming the most hated man in in his own country. There, I was just also seeing that a news thing from Caitlin Johnstone that apparently an Israeli packed armored car drove over its own planted bomb and uh, and in reaction killed 45 Palestinians. I mean that's still going on. I mean this ceasefire, quote unquote, is very similar to the ceasefire that happened many months ago, where they only got to like step one, two, or maybe balked at three out of 21 steps, just like now. And basically, I mean, there's within 24 hours, Israel was breaking their own ceasefire, and it's just kind of coming back into that again. So, uh, the trucks really aren't trickling, they're just trickling in. So, there's the old school thing of delaying the trucks and having to inspect them and all that. So I really think a lot of this is just an interlude. I know that in some of the new articles I'm writing, which next week I shall be publishing later next week in my new Hogue Prophecy report, the September into October report, um, is that they're just basically not doing anything it's just people spinning their wheels. The whole thing with Trump and his uh, uh, trying to do these silly things with the Tomahawks. It's the Tomahawks. It's possible that I kind of thought it was interestingly planned that the Tomahawks thing came up, and then not long after, it came up right when there was a huge U.S. Army convention showing new stuff to buy. And it just so happens that there is now a from another industrial company that works for the military industrial complex. It's kind of an answer to this really foolish Typhoon system that it's allowed Tomahawks to be launched from land again. But it's such a big white elephant, massive, operatic, you know, like a 50-foot trailer that the Tomahawks peek out of, pulled by a great big truck, and then similar like 10 trailers for one of these things, and it only launches a total of 16 at one time, and it's got to be the biggest target that you'd ever see anywhere. And they have a few of them in the Philippines pointed at the Taiwan area in China, but I mean, they're such big things that they could be blown away in no time at all. And they're like billions of dollars. It's a classic example of military industrial complex waste, excess, bad function, and a lot of profits for some people. But once again, another weapon that is profit based and not use based, which is the very nature of our military industrial complex has been completely exposed since 2022 with all these weapons that are rusting in Ukraine that we've left flaming on the Ukrainian battlefields. And the Russian weapons are much better and much more advanced. We can only so the only amount that Trump of Tomahawks that Trump can even send will be between 20 and 50. Now, back to that little mid-October convention where they were showing some new equipment. Isn't it interesting that just when Trump was starting to talk about getting the Tomahawks in, there so happens to be trucks that have been built that are a little more intelligently built, a little more like HIMARS launchers that can fire at one time 4 large Tomahawk missiles from the back of the truck. And these ex-MAVs, as they're called, happen to have enough prototypes to perhaps send 10 or 20 of these, or perhaps maybe they're already there in Ukraine, who can fire these Tomahawk missiles. But the thing is, this really became a button pusher for the Russians. And in a way, it was quite interesting to see last week that the Russian press was really pressuring Putin to stop playing around with these negotiations with these people in America. There's this whole game that they're playing where they're trying to be nice to Trump and kind of treat him with kid gloves because of course he is a rather incontinent-minded man, and he and the Russian people, which by the way have a lot better press department than we do, um, are really getting sick and tired of it. And one of the press guys in the conference with Putin actually almost yelled out, raised his voice, and said, because Putin was talking about, well, we're still waiting for signs from Trump in the next round, and then the guy just called out and said, "Mr. President, they've sent us the sign. Trump has sent us the sign. The sign is his answer to your peace deals is to send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, which can only be fired and guided by the United States. His answer is he wants to go to war with us." And Putin had to is being it's just a bit of how the tension is trying to push Putin to be a little more hardliner with the Americans. It's like, stop wasting our time with this guy. He's just let us do what we want, the whole country. I mean, this is what people don't understand in the West, because if they're listening to their news, they're listening to lies and propaganda and everything upside down from what it is. Everybody thinks that Putin is some big dictator, some big Dr. Evil, and he runs everything. And if he burps, everybody has to follow that order. And so I wasn't going to say the other end, but so he's it's not like that. In the Hogue prophecy reports, I have sources that are not part of the propaganda industry of big news in the West. So with my reports, you get hundreds of sources that you can then check yourself and then check their sources, and you will find accurate, real news. And one of the things you'll discover is that in the Russian politics, Vladimir Putin is considered too moderate. He is actually a moderate. He's a Libra. He likes to negotiate things. He tried until he was blue in the face for years to negotiate an end to this Ukrainian civil war that started in 2014. And he was just led along the primrose path because he really would like to cause peace. And although the people of Russia love him, they consider his flaw is that he's trying too hard to negotiate, when clearly the people on the other side are just shining him on and not really wanting to negotiate. So, uh, so that's but when I'm just doing a lot of astrology on him, and he was having a rather bad week last week with all of that, but that's going to change. And so hopefully we will see what happens. Also, if this summit is happening, it's very interesting about this summit. It brings up some concerns I've had before, because it's happened before. Um, One of the ways that Putin's enemies want to get rid of him is when he's in the air. That there was this attack where the strategic bomber wing of the Russian Federation was attacked by Ukrainian drones that came out of trucks that the drivers didn't even know they were just driving cargo, and the boxes inside the trucks on the trucks opened up the roofs, and then all these attack drones came out, and they were positioned in Siberia, in five of the major strategic bomber airstrips in Russia. The thing is that because we have the START treaty, and Americans do it too, all the strategic bombers have to be parked in the open air on the runways, so the satellites of both countries can count them all and make sure there's no changes. So, this whole plan played on the weakness of people honoring a treaty for peace, nuclear peace, and they started attacking what they said the Ukrainians said they destroyed 40% of the Russian strategic force. That's not true. Their own videos on the attack drones show that they only got three, and the other five were actually old jets that were being cannibalized for their parts because they haven't been made since the Soviet times. So they were attacking basically jets parked with no engines on the wings. That's not exactly, and they weren't too dumb to even, they just let those videos come out, and it just showed that they were attacking piles of spare parts. And so this 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 situation in the middle of that attack, there were swarms of drones that actually almost shot down the Russian president's helicopter in Kursk. when all that was happening. He was landing, and then they were going after him, attack drones from Ukraine, and they almost got the helicopter, but he managed not to be killed. And um, I can't tell you what danger the world would jump in a heartbeat if weapons guided by the United States or aided by the United States actually killed the head of the Russian state. You very well could have World War III from that, or some very, very strong counterattack, like hitting all the European leaders' offices with the Reshniks or something like that. I can't even imagine what a overwhelmingly stupid move that would be. So here we have this summit, which is going to happen in Budapest, in Hungary. But the problem is that because of ICC and other courts who have kind of trumped up a whole thing about President Putin, he can't get out of Russia to a lot of places because if he lands in Europe, he will be arrested and taken to the Hague in a prison and for trial. Now, the issue that they would try him for is this really trumped up issue that he somehow separated children from their parents and brought them into Russia as some kind of way to just turn them into pure Russians or something like that. No, I've seen the situation firsthand from my contacts in Russia, some of them being American journalists who live there. And what really happened is that in the war, a lot of people got misplaced. And what the Russians have been trying to do and have been successful is give those kids a place to live while they try to find their parents and get them reunited with their parents. But the ICC went ahead and did this thing. It was purely a political motivation. I mean, there was a lot more solidity to what the world courts did over what Gantz and Galant, I mean, and Netanyahu were doing in committing genocide in Palestine. But with that said, people can argue that later. The reality is that Vladimir Putin's presidential plane can't actually fly over most of Europe. So it's going to have to take a very circuitous route. It's probably going to happen around Halloween or the first few days of November, this summit in Hungary. They're going to have to take a circuitous route from Moscow all the way down to the northeastern Russian coast of the Black Sea, where he will fly over that part of the Black Sea and over Turkish airspace, which is friendly. But he can't do Bulgaria and he can't do Greece. He has to go all the way deep into the Mediterranean, into international waters beyond the island of Crete, and then fly his jet with his escort uh, through the narrow mouth between Italy and Albania of the Adriatic Sea, and then follow the Adriatic up a bit and then turn northeast through friendly Montenegro's coast and mountains. And then you go fly over Serbia to get to Hungary. Now, the Ukrainians have been fighting in the Eastern Black Sea. They've been using drones and missiles and things. One danger is that because the Ukrainian Secret Service has been trying to kill the Russian president many times, and so this is a very dangerous junket for him to be flying over the Black Sea, possibly shot down by someone we don't know who. Oh, maybe he wanted to definitely shoot it down over the ocean, deep ocean, so it'd be very hard to retrieve the plane and see if it was a technical problem or something else. And so I'm very concerned again that this summit, it's this summit was actually, if they were following protocol, the next summit should have been Moscow. And Trump wanted it to like the idea of Hungary as another option. Now, Putin was okay with that. And so he said, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So um, the good news is, I think the astrology is really good for the summit. The bad news is that either getting there or going home, there might be a slim chance that somebody might try to destroy the jet. And we have a whole new world of horrors potentially coming from that. So, like this third world war that's been conventionally fighting since 2022 going nuclear. Um, the other the other thing is that the Tomahawks. This is not the first time Tomahawks have been talked about. It's this thing that some of my best sources, Alex Crisifaro and Alexander Mercurius of the Duran, have often talked about that. I've even quoted some of their back and forths about it last year, where this whole idea of escalation elevator, where if you get on an escalator, you can't get off of it going back from where you're coming. It's very difficult because it's going up. Well, a lot of the ways in which people are escalating this conflict is just like that, where there are certain things they keep trying to do. The other pattern that's been in the West, with Biden and now with Trump, is this idea of, oh, we're never going to do that. Oh, we're never going to actually send Tomahawks, and they already know that we shoot them. Well, we won't do that. That might cause World War III. Well, and then, months go by and things go by, and then suddenly they're doing it. Now, somebody might say that maybe this is Trump doing his aggressive kind of art of the deal thing where he's trying to play a strong hand. And I can't deny that talking about the Tomahawks being used has definitely got the Russians' attention. But where Trump is dreadfully miscalculating, or the people that are thinking for him in his cabinet, who are complete neocons and completely drinking their own neocon or Kool-Aid, um, he's been convinced that doing these kind of things actually gives him a bartering chip, gives him more cards in negotiation. Threaten something. This is classic Trump, and they're playing to that art of the deal Trump. Threaten something really big, throw the other side off, and then kind of come back magnanimously and be open for another thing. And I think that's what he's going to do, going to see Putin, but it's a different Putin now. This so-called productive phone call that they had, apparently Putin laid down the line to him, basically, I imagine saying, hey, this thing's stalled. All the things that we talked about doing, because he's even more interested, the Russians are more interested in reestablishing a professional diplomatic connection with the United States that we used to have, that Biden dismantled, completely dismantled, to the point where the Russian ambassador in Washington, D.C. left because he had nobody to talk to. In no time during the long Cold War, from 1948 to 1989, when it officially ended, a lot of people say 1991, no, it officially ended in 89, according to the Russian and American leaders of the time, George H.W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev. In December, it was declared over in 1989. So all through that period of time, even during the worst times, the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Suez Crisis, and where even when when the Israelis in the Yom Kippur War were winning and they were actually crossing the Nile to take territory uh, from that was west of the line of the canals, and then Brezhnev called in to Nixon's offices and said, "Well, our paratrooper divisions are now in the air and they're heading for Cairo." to stop this incursion of the Israelis. And there was a 9 hour period there where we were back in the Cuban Missile Crisis moment. And this time, military forces were hours away from moving in, and you would have Russians fighting the Israelis and kicking their butts back over the Suez Canal. And then the Americans would have to come in, and there you have it, Armageddon. So it's interesting as I was trying to read what Nixon had to say in Nixon's own memoirs. And I found it very interesting that at one point all he said was, yeah, in the middle of all this stuff that was happening with Watergate, because it was right when it was all coming apart, 1973. And he said, and then I found out that for 9 hours there, we almost had a nuclear war with Russia. And it's sort of like matter of factly. And I wonder, why is he saying that? Well, it turns out, long story short, Henry Kissinger and the chief of staff, basically, the chief of staff said to Henry Kissinger, "Where's the president? We've got to do something about this." And he said, "Mr. Kissinger, the president is hammered. He's drunk." So Nixon was drinking during those final times, talking to the portraits of presidents in the hall alone, and that is actually true. And so the president was drunk. And so the chief of staff and Henry Kissinger had to just pretend like they were getting orders from him because somebody had to do something. The president was incapacitated to do any of this. So they both, in 9 hours, settled the whole thing down. Um, and it's, it's quite a story. Um, so the 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 Tomahawks will probably come up again in these talks if this goes on. Um, I'm hoping that the message that cordially, but a little bluntly, that the Russians have been very cordial and treating Trump with kid gloves, like he's an 8-year-old, um, bucking him up because he's vain. And because how else do you talk to him? This man changes his foreign policies according to the last person he was listening to. If Trump, if the Russians are the last people he's listening to, he'll have some really wonderful, wow, we could really go somewhere with this. And then he'll sit down and Keith Kellogg's Frosted Flakes will come in and tell him some BS, neocon BS, and then he'll go, oh, well, the neocon BS says this, we will do this. I mean, the problem is we have a president this will be the second president in a row that's having cognitive decline. Uh, and he's not the same man. Sometime around March, he stopped being the guy who won the election. There was something faded. And his voice got monotonous, and he's really talking like this all the time now. Well, it's really great. It's really not like, it's really great. It's one thing. We're going to do this. We're going to do. Well, it's really great, and it's so great, and we have a great country and great leaders. And did I say how great it was? Even a man of limited vocabulary, he used to know how to read. It comes up like spurts where it's back. The old Trump is back because that's what happens with cognitive decline. Um, but but his vocabulary, which was never great, which always seemed to like to, for a hypnotic effect, say a thing. Well, it's terrible. I got to say, it's terrible that this thing happened. You know, he does threes, and he's done that since the beginning because it's actually a hypnotic suggestion technique. And uh,
I feel as though when he speaks, it's as if he's doing some sort of real estate deal.
Yeah, it is. That's
I
all
mean,
he
no
knows.
matter what it is,
That's
nuclear
it. Well, that's
war,
it.
or dealing with Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
We're going to get a deal. It's going to be a great deal. It's going to be a
Right.
wonderful, great deal. You know, you know, and because he's I don't know. The man doesn't read. The man
No,
doesn't study. I don't think the man even knows the constitutional laws, and he doesn't have somebody next to his shoulder to remind him what he legally can and can't do as president of the United States. That's why no king demonstrations are happening across the United
I
States.
think
He thinks
my
he's the king. He can do whatever he likes, fire whatever he likes, throw people out of the country wherever he likes.
my observation of him is that he has a lot of street smarts and he
Yeah.
knows on how to raise money
Hmm.
and how to book certain revenues or expenses over
Mhm.
long periods of time due to just the arc of construction with large buildings in New York.
Yeah.
Is it
Oh, yeah.
multiple year construction,
Yeah.
multiple year cash
Yeah.
flows? And that's a complex, I mean, from an accounting standpoint,
Yeah.
that's complicated. But
It's
that's
complicated.
so he has smarts, but he's not intellectual. They're different. They're totally different. And he's surrounded by a lot of people just in DC. I'm not talking about his cabinet, but just in DC, that's where the intelligentsia is. And so you have a lot of people that are intellectual, but and some of them are smart too, but they don't have the street smarts that a New Yorker, had to because he was a Queens guy. So being
Oh,
a
yeah.
major real estate guy in Manhattan, he
Yeah.
really had to climb up a mountain to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's nothing more
It wasn't
challenging.
given to him at all. So he
And I
had to.
and his book that was written for him is his words and stuff. And it's him. And I still say, you want to understand Trump, read Art of the Deal. It lays it all out, and it is one of the most competitive markets of real estate in the world. And he knew how to do that. He knew how, because there's a bit of sleaze factor and a little bit of mafia mixed in and all that, because it's Manhattan Island. You know, he he knew how to play that. But when I was watching him and when I was writing my book a year before he ran, and his astrology, I kept thinking and talking about in the book the things he would say, because he knew this side of the political game, the one who's the outsider looking in, and you're dealing with the government officials of New York City. He knew that side of it, but one day he finds himself on in their chair looking out, and he doesn't know that world at all. He knows how to deal with it as the businessman, but he has no knowledge. The man has never studied any of the presidents or anything. I mean, Kennedy and Nixon and all these people, Reagan, they all studied. They, I don't think the man's ever picked up the 4,000 words of the U.S. Constitution and took a little time to read it. Um, he doesn't read. So that means he doesn't read reports. Most presidents are reading lots of reports. Most presidents are inviting in people outside of their inner circle to just pick their brains. Specialists of this, specialists of that is very common. But he has he is depending way too much on channeling so-called experts that all have very obvious agendas, that and they see a guy, this open channel, which he is, which I always said is his greatest strength and is his greatest problem, this wide open channel, who will channel whoever is in front of him. And a lot of the deep state Denzians, they said, ooh, we can just kiss him up a little bit and tell him how great he is, and we got him in our hands. And it started in the first term, but now that he's more frail because of that delay, I mean, there's the karma of the fraudulent votes of 2020. That it and I write about it, that because Alzheimer's is in Trump's family.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it is. Yes, his father had it. His father had it and died of it. His older sister had it and died recently of it. And so I did the patterns of when the symptoms started to happen. The thing that's unfortunate about this delayed 4-year term is that Trump, before this term is out, will be in the same period that his sister was starting to show signs. It's the other there's cousins of Trump that have written books about the Alzheimer's in their family and all. So there's some of my sources. It's in the records of this. So Alzheimer's is very strong in his family, and it comes quick when it comes, and it comes maybe about now. Not stuff. For a long, long time, people would dispute that Biden had problems, but I some of my relatives have the strain of Alzheimer's in their body too. So you start to see the signs, and so it comes on slowly at first, and then it comes very rapid. And the tendency in his family is it actually comes more rapid than it did in Biden's case. Although Biden was already well into it by the time he became president. That's why they hid him in the basement for most of the time. And for some mysterious reason, he wins millions upon millions of more votes than anybody ever voted before. And of course, the all that whole game was the because of COVID shutting everybody down. Conveniently, that was there to make this pass. All the 50 states, most of which have never done ballots from home, mail-in ballots, all decided they'd learn how to do it. And they had just a few weeks to learn. And that just opened the whole situation to remarkable frauds that I have odious amounts of information just shows in different states that, and the reason why all the states never opened up their ballots for recounts, just like they did that for Florida, did that in the famous Florida recount in 2000. That's why I had objective proof that my prediction that if a recount happened, Al Gore would win by a very slim margin, but he actually won more votes than Bush Jr. And everybody's saying, "Oh, you're just trying to keep your streak going." I said, "Listen, don't project your ego on mine, okay? That's not what I'm about." And I said, "Just open up those and let's have a recount." I am still convinced from what happened in 2000 that if all the 50 states opened up those ballots, we're all still there, I think. It is a federal crime to dispense of them. I wouldn't be surprised that some of them have, especially some of the ballot piles that have one name on maybe 10,000 ballots that got passed. There's a lot of that, a lot of stuff like that going on. So there's possibility of 5 million ballots that were fraudulent. 5 million, and they almost all went to Biden. So, and then isn't it interesting that 4 years later, when everybody's a little more, well, we better not repeat that again, we might not be so lucky. Isn't it interesting that a lot of those ballots that were so extra didn't appear this time, for Biden? Uh, and so, one of the things that I'm writing about in my 9 articles that will be released next week is the tale of two. The first 2 articles are the tale of 2 Christian martyrs that triggered a hot civil war in the United States and one that might have triggered a cold civil war in our present day United States. John Brown, the preacher who went and raided the Harper's Ferry armory to try to get weapons with this little band of 21 guys to then pass throughout all the slaves in the northern slave state of Virginia. And it was overthrown, ironically, by a company of Marines led by Colonel Robert E. Lee. This was in 1859. And with him was one of his adjutants, who was the man who walked up with a flag on his saber tip to talk to John Brown and the guys inside and all the frightened hostages that they had hiding in the back. And he said, "Will you surrender?" And John Brown said, "No, we're all going to die here first." And so he went back, and that man happened to be Jeb Stuart, Lieutenant, First Lieutenant, or Second Lieutenant Jeff Stuart, who ended up being the famous cavalry general of the Confederate Army. So it's interesting. Three icons, one a purveyor, a catalyst, and two icons of the Civil War were in that incident, which actually sped up the breakdown of. It was the trigger. That act of terrorism was the trigger that uh, got the Union abolitionists to be more aggressive and got the slave owners to be more afraid, the slave states, because those Northerners are now starting to try to incite a revolution of blacks, just like in Haiti that happened in 1791 through 1804, where the first time in history, slave nation actually rebelled and kicked out the French, and for a time were independent, but then the whole other story went south. Very sad for Haiti. It's had been struggling ever since 1804. Um, you can free slaves, but the slave mentality, if it's programmed there, just runs you into another slave situation. It's no one's fault. It's the fault of programming and conditioning people. You know, um, if you think like a slave, you'll end up being a slave again, and it has to be broken. The idea has to be educated out of you. Um, so anyway, the while all these moving parts are going on, where all this consideration of doing a summit in Budapest, which has some astrological positives in it for the two men that will be negotiating, but again, it's like um, it'll probably just go back to the same thing again, with a difference. Right now, there are at least four major encirclements of Ukrainian forces on the Ukrainian Eastern Front line that are beginning now to unravel. The Russians are in Pokrovsk, have just moved rapidly now. The Ukrainian defenses have collapsed in the city, and now the Ukrainians are trying to retreat to the north end of the city. There's forces of the Russians that are now at a point where they might cut off all of the supply lines into the area where 15 Ukrainian brigades are. And it's looking like days, or if not a week, Pokrovsk is going to collapse, and there's going to be a huge hole in the Ukrainian line. Similarly, this is happening in the Zaporozhye offensive, is taking out these fortified villages, and when those are down, there'll be a wide open step for the Russian forces to advance and do, as I said 2 years ago, would be the way it would happen: roll up the Ukrainian line, get just behind the Ukrainian line, even use the second line of fortifications that was supposed to be their fallback, and from there just roll them up. And so uh, we seem to be coming at the other thing too is that it's not being reported by mainstream news, but the assaults of the air attacks that Russia has been doing across the Ukrainian infrastructure has been of a level never seen before in this war. It is quite something, and it has systematically hit all the power stations that run the railroads. It's also the drones have been. I mean, the Russians now build Garan drones at 1,000 a day, and because the Ukrainians can't shoot down the missiles anymore, even the slow cruise missiles, the Iskanders, and they can't shoot it down. Their anti-aircraft system is completely broken. Um, and mainly because it's machined by Patriot missiles, which have never been any good. Not even back in the Gulf War were they any good. So the what has happened is that now they're not shooting so many missiles in at this moment, maybe only 160 or 170 rather than 800 drones and maybe 25 missiles each night. I've seen the footage from my contacts in Ukraine as well as out that show what's going on. And, the entire Kiev, the capital, was down. All the lights were out, and everybody was going deaf, trying to walk in and out of their apartments and businesses because of all the hundreds of generators going ring. And so they're going through all that gasoline too. It's the beginning of autumn. It'll soon be winter. And the idea is that to end this war or to pressure the Ukrainian government to come to the peace table and get real, the Russians are taking down the infrastructure. This is war, folks. It's not nice. Wars are terrible. Wars should never get to the point where they're fought. But when they're fought, the kind of winning that requires, and the Russians have been up to this point, not actually the casualty rate of civilians is one of the lowest in any modern war because the special military operation that they're doing, that's what they call it, is not really a full-scale attack. I mean, if this was full-scale war, all the Ukraine cities would be in rubble, just like it's Germany, and millions would have been killed. And this is not happening because, frankly, the Russians don't want to do that because this is more a civil war than a war against another adversarial country, and it, it actually has more interphase of families mixed in both sides than anything we had in our Civil War. I mean, it's almost everyone because the Soviet Union, before it collapsed, everybody mixed and moved throughout the vast Soviet Union. People married, people commune with Ukrainians and Russians and White Russians and all this. And so Ukraine has actually, as a country, never been an independent country. They've just been a larger province of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic at that time. And so this whole idea that Ukraine can be a country has problems because there's a whole lot of provinces that were added to Ukraine that aren't Ukrainian. And that's been the problem. And they were okay. I know because I watched thousands of hours of the people talking about this in the Donbass region. They said, "Yeah, I grew up here." I said, "Well, I'm a Russian living in Ukraine, and Ukraine's my country, and I'm fine with that. Let's just do that." But then what happened was that when the 2014 coup that we financed and directed that overthrew the democratic elected president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, who was a Russian Ukrainian, and replaced it with neo-Nazis of Sloboda and right sector, Banderistas, some of these people are the grandchildren of Hitler's best non-German allies in the SS, the Ukrainian Nazis, who did most of the hard work, did most of the managing of the death camps, and had a big part in being the people killing 50, 60,000 people in Babur Yar in 1941. This is a ravine outside of Kiev where 40, 50,000 people were told to meet there, and then they were systematically killed, mostly by Ukrainian Nazis. So, in my writing, I try to give you a context that will not be told you. I mean, I'm sure many of you who are listening to this show right now don't even know that Ukraine has a very serious fascist problem. And one of the reasons why this war, the civil war with the Russians happened is they weren't looking for it, but as soon as the US put another government in that nobody voted for in the democracy of Ukraine, yeah, maybe the nationalist Ukrainians were happy to have it forced upon everybody else in Ukraine, but 40% of the country, which was Russian, it wasn't a problem. They were living with the Ukrainians, but now you've got people in the government that say, I mean, put it like this way, what if we had a government where that was imposed upon us in Washington, and they decided that all the people that are woke should be eliminated, cast out of the country? Or let's put it another way. Let's say a dictatorial government imposed by another foreign country uh, put a president that we didn't vote for, but um, maybe he was pro-woke, and so the woke people are all happy to have him there, even though he never earned their vote. But he's going to go to war on all the rednecks in the red states and say, no, we're you can't think and practice your view of American politics. It's illegal now. Just like what happened with the Russians in Ukraine, the first thing that the Ukrainian Nazis did when they took over the government was, with our help, was say you can't speak Russian in any governmental building. You are forced to only speak Ukrainian. And then they started saying, we're not going to let you teach Russian in schools. You Muscovites, they started calling them, are not the same as us. You are secondary citizens in this country, and then what they did is start cutting off all the resources and just using it in the oblasts that were filled with Ukrainians. And then there's a province that's far west and deep into the Ukrainian area on the Black Sea coast that's called Odessa. Odessa has been for 300 plus years one of the most Russian populated cities in Russia. It's a port city. There, during the first stages of this new regime that was in there in 2014, a lot of people, Russian Ukrainians, peacefully demonstrated and had a little like people's camp, Russian people's camp, in front of the union buildings, tradesman building. And I remember seeing it happening. It did the night before they attacked them. There were these huge torchlight parades marching up and down, just like Nazi parades, all going boom, 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 and just like right out of Hitler's times. And they're all marching with the same old flags that they used when they were allies of Hitler, the wolf's angle on a yellow flag with a black wolf's angle, and the occult black sun, and all this stuff, all the regalia of the SS. And there they are, and pictures and posters of Bandera, the Nazi George Washington of this movement. And they got in trains, they marched, and then all these people with clubs and stuff, they went into trains, and then the following day, they attacked the camp, set it on fire, and beat the people, that men and women and children, everybody there, and beat them. They were peacefully just demonstrating, like, we needed, consider it, we're part of this Ukrainian land. We may be Russians, but we're Ukrainians now too. They don't think that's so. The people that came in and beat them up surrounded them. And then I have footage of the mayor, who's also a Nazi, standing around with all the chief of police, and they're all looking on as they allowed people to set that Union um, palace for tradesmen on fire. I have the footage in my archives of the Hogue Prophecy Bulletin, where they are burning and people are climbing out in the flaming windows and trying to jump. And when they jump, these people come up and beat them with clubs to death. This is the horror of Ukraine. It's this that triggered the civil war, that triggered, by provoking Russia in 2022, the invasion. Because you see, this is another important thing to understand. Russia is not just a country. The Russian president is responsible for the Russian civilization. That means anyone who is Russian must be protected by the Russian Federation, including 1 million Israelis who used to live in Russia, Russian Jews who are there. They feel responsible for protecting the Israelis that are from Russia. And so when people were being murdered by the tens of thousands, massacred, shelled, tanks firing on civilian buildings. This was all happening between 2014 to 2022. And I saw it all and reported on it. And there was a whole lot of Ukrainian Nazis that didn't like what I was saying. So this this context, most of you don't have. This context you don't have. You just say Russia, Putin, bad, little house elf Dobby, and this is where it all happened. It's just he good, he bad. And it's a little more complicated than that. And our leaders, got us involved in this by forcibly overturning a democratically elected government. Now, what happened after that is Poroshenko became, after the interim fascist government changed the rules, and Poroshenko was elected, and then Vladimir Zelensky was elected, who is a Jewish Russian. He's actually a Russian, ethnic Russian Ukrainian. He had to learn when he became president how to speak Ukrainian, because it was illegal for people to speak Russian. If people are walking on the street and they're speaking Russian, people will beat them up in Ukrainian cities. I It's not an illusion. I have the footage. Thousands of men of all ages are being attacked by gangs of securities guards from the main security forces, and being beaten and dragged to the barracks to become soldiers. They get maybe a month's training. They're not given bullets until they're on the front, and most of them die. It's and this is not stories, just hearsay. I've got the footage. So, but you won't see it on CNN. You won't see it on Fox. You won't see it in the legacy media, because those organs are propaganda organs. They didn't used to be, but I've lived long enough in my 70th year to remember a time when you really got a lot more news than you do now. You don't get any if you don't come to dare to look into alternative sources like mine, Hogue Prophecy Report, where I do it from a more prophetic angle. I look at future trends. And so I've seen all this, and and those who I use as sources, like The Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, it's a must. Deep Dive with is another one. Scott Ritter is also very good. Uh, the Greeks, Alexander Mercurius and Alex Christopharo of the Duran, exemplary, constantly accurate. The main reason why this is so important from a prophetic angle is that I wrote a book once about a group of prophets spanning from the 7th century to the 17th, to a few from Nostradamus' time, including Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce, and so people from the 20th century, that all had a remarkably accurate record for predicting World War I and World War II. And some in ways that are so hard to do that it's very rare that any prophet can do that, where he names the year or how long it will last or what kind of weapons will arise. Now, one thing that happens, there's 3 world wars. They all see 3 world wars, not 2. So we may be in it now. And the most important vision that is so germane to how you are misinformed is that it starts, Matthias Stormberger from the late 1700s, who was a cow herder in Bavaria, and his stuff was later set down before he died in 1820 because he was illiterate. But he said in the Third World War, in one day, more people will die than all the wars human beings ever fought. And the people will walk with their eyes wide open into these catastrophes. Your eyes are wide open to bunk, and you're walking right into the catastrophe. And my work is to help you put a soul behind those eyes, where your only vision of the world is your own rather zombie reflection looking into your own cell phone with your head down, like a sheep eating grass. That's how you're eating your data. We are those people who are walking with our eyes wide open, completely uninformed into these major catastrophes. So I hope a miracle happens, something happens in this Budapest gathering. I know that Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, is one of the few European leaders that reminds me of European leaders when they used to be intelligent and great. When I see the leaders of Europe, except for people like Fico of Slovakia or Orban or Vučić of Serbia, I've studied European history all my life, and I cannot recall a time in European history when I've seen so many mediocrities in places of ultimate power who don't care about their people at all. And
Would you consider Macron in that category?
absolutely, he's one of the worst. He's one of the worst. He's a masochist. His wife is a sadist. His Mr. Wife.
I didn't know that he was a sadist.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, she likes to beat him up all the time. It got caught once on the plane. He's suddenly she's grabbing his face and going, "Arr," like, and he's looking as the door opens and goes, "Oh, hi," and kind of gets off the
Well,
plane.
actually,
But he was like being like,
didn't he
that,
have didn't he have one black eye?
I don't know.
I
He's
thought he
also
had
got a
one.
coke problem. It was him, I think, it was the German chancellor at the time, him and another leader, and people kind of got into the train. They're leaving, Zelensky's place and going back on the train back to Europe from Kiev. And of course, Zelensky has a real coke problem. I have footage of that too, of him high as a kite in the presidential office. And he's not like he's talking like this. And he's and he spins his chair and goes, oh. And they tried to get it off. The government tried to erase it, but once something an instant appears in X or something, it's there. So yeah, he was absolutely higher than a kite. And he also does this when he's been doing it a lot.
Right, right.
Classic. And his political activities, his decisions, very much is kind of over the top hope that crashes, like, oh, now we'll get the Tomahawks. Now we'll win the war with it. We have 3 time zones. We're going to defeat a country which is 11 time zones. We have maybe only 20 million people left. Everybody else has left our country. They have more population because they're all coming out of Ukraine, 150 million. Um, our little army, which is somehow misplaced 2 million men, who are probably all dead, with only less than 600,000 active combat troops, up against nearly 1 million Russians. We're going to win that. 50 Tomahawks. Yes, yes. Oh, yes, even more. I see this coming. this is a druggie talking. This is the kind of degenerates that are that are running Europe. So these guys were all trying to hide the coke, and they all came in. Oh, and Macron kind of tries to put it under this and all. And it was definitely it was a bag of snow. They'd been snorting with, and then there was the spoon. The other guy had the spoon, and he had to kind of slowly tuck it under his hand. He had the coke spoon, and I mean, caught red-handed. This is your leaders in Europe, and Macron. French are a nuclear power. And then this Keith Starmer he looks like a twit that just came out of a Monty Python skit about the Twit Olympics, where they're all in their tweed and the fedoras and they're all, here now the next obstacle course. And he runs up to a mannequin that has women's underwear on. Is now try to unstrap the bra from the front. These guys are trying to unstrap the bra. It's Monty Python. And now try to shoot yourself, try to kill yourself, and he's missing. He keeps missing, and then finally, oh, he did it! And then there's a little mouse jump, and he said, now try to jump over this hurdle. And he's like going, woo. And so they're all going, oh, well, Keith Starmer should have been in that skit. He would have fit right in. I mean, just a few days ago when Trump was in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and then there were all the little seven dwarf vassals of the United States. The European leaders were all crowded, and he's on the podium, and he's saying, "Hey, where's Keith? Where's Keith Starmer?" Well, no, actually, he didn't. Where's the British leader? He couldn't even remember his name. And he's back there, and he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Trump looks back and, oh, yeah, you come on up. And he kind of goes, okay, well, here I am. And there's this one point when Trump's had enough of him, and he just shoulders him back and takes over the podium. And Keith just goes, well, gosh, okay. I mean, he's also the head of a nuclear power.
I find that Starmer is one of the dumbest leaders out
He,
there,
he
especially for
couldn't try hard to pretend to be dumber than he is. It's quite remarkable.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I feel that Starmer's government's going to collapse. Macron's government's going to collapse.
Mm.
It's going to force a new election, and
Yeah.
then he's going to get kicked out. Now, I think Le Pen is in jail right now, isn't she?
Well, no, I don't know if she's in jail. She just can't run. But I'm not clear about that. But she's definitely still running. Well, she will probably be, if her party gets in, they will drop that rule, and she will either lead from behind or not. But I've always been saying it's one of my longest term prophecies that I always thought Macron would be replaced by Le Pen, and that was way back years ago when he's almost been there like a dozen years. And
I don't know French politics very well, but is Le Pen, would you consider Le Pen a conservative?
yeah,
Or okay.
but
And
of course
Trump
they
is
make her
more
off as a flaming Nazi, and just like putting swastikas on Trump, it's not. Trump has his problems, but let's keep the problems accurate, not over the top. And no, she's a no. What she has is her main voting bloc are the rural French people and South France, where she's from. She's from Provence, where Nostradamus came from, and um, a lot of what's happening. I mean, I have one of my dearest friends has been spending 2 years in Paris, and she's from there, and she's really getting to know her city like she hadn't ever before. And what has happened, she said, in the cities now 80, it's like 80%, 60% of the people are from Africa, and she grew up in a place where it was used to be just Europeans, and they've literally it's what has happened to Europe, Western Europe, is it's literally been invaded like the Goths invaded Rome, um, with all these people. And the problem is, just like the Goths, most people in Rome assimilated. France was famous for having black people and other races in its area, even early 20th century. But the game was that you had to speak French and become assimilated into the culture. And in a way, in we're a nation of immigrants too, and our it just was, well, yeah, you come to America because you like America, you like what it's doing, so I'm going to learn how to speak American. I'm going to vote and do the things that Americans do. So there was a feeling when people came here that they wanted to be here and be Americans. But what's happening in Europe is all these people are coming there and they're saying, okay, now you have to follow our Sharia laws. All you European women who are showing too much of your bodies, you have to put shrouds over all of you. It's literally like they've come as invaders. Say, we don't like your culture. We're going to bring our own and just crowd you out. And that it's harsh to say, but that is exactly what's happening in
There's a
Paris.
term, I don't know, I don't remember the term, but there's a term that Islam has where you lie to the public to infiltrate a society to push for a caliphate. They use a term. It's
Yes.
forcefully lying to the
Yeah.
public, and people are saying that Mamdani. These are individuals that know Sharia. All right,
Hmm.
but they've moved away from their religion or are more secular,
Hmm.
and they are saying that Mamdani is doing
Ah, that's
this
interesting.
particular thing.
For
That there's
anybody who doesn't know, that's probably your next mayor of New York.
right, right.
Yeah, city. And yeah, it could be. You know, every every form of a religion-like organization, even atheism, can be considered a religion by some people, an anti-religion religion. You know,
Mhm.
the I agree with my master Osho when he said the priests and politicians are the mafia of the soul. When they're not living the teaching, but using it as a way to exploit others and gain power over others. Forced conversion makes you look more powerful if you converted all the people to your dogma. So the dogmatists, who are always the black shadow of all religions, the mafia of the soul. I'm not dissing true teachers and preachers and people of different faiths, but there's always been the problem of the politicizing of religion because frankly it's the most sophisticated form of politics because you don't have to vote for them to keep them in office. They just say it's God's will, you know. If I can, in the Muslim way of saying is if I come in and doing this caliphate,
Mhm.
and if it happens, well, it's God's will. It's God wanted this to happen because I pulled it off. It's like this great line in this marvelous actor who plays Salahuddin, one of my favorite Muslim warriors from the medieval times who fought the Crusaders. Even when I was a kid, I was just really interested in him. And there's this remarkable actor in Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, which I highly recommend. If you haven't seen the director's cut, it's a whole different movie and it's a masterpiece. It's one of Ridley Scott's unknown masterpieces. If you see the director's cut. Well, anyway, he's got the Caliph of the Sunni sects, played by a Mexican actor, really convincing. And of course, he's nagging Salahuddin, the commander of the forces of the Safavid Empire, I think, and which were fighting off the Crusaders in Jerusalem. And he's saying, basically, but you still haven't taken Jerusalem. And then he was pointing out all the problems, and he said, but before I came, he said, it must have been God's will that I came because your commanders before did not know how to march an army in a desert by following the trail of wells. He would take the army out to thirst. Who then brought me here to change this? Who but God? Who but Allah uh, gave me this brain to think rightly and win where you had no winners? You know, who but God? Inshallah, God willing. I, I mean, it's interesting is the I mean, it's a very interesting, almost revolutionary concept for Western religions. This concept of Allah is a um, is not to be made into a statue and worshipped. In fact, Muhammad rose out of the Arabian civilization of that time, which is all animist. They worship idolatry and different many gods. And and one of the first thing he did when he finally was able to win a victory and get back to Mecca is that he went in and had all the statues torn down. That's where that all started. It was it was considered blasphemy. And and the concept, as at least as I'm trying to understand it through my being entering into Muslim world through Sufism, I'm a worlder, uh, is is the concept that um, Allah is not really embodied. Allah is like a presence, like a vast source of everything. And although there's levels of that in Yahweh and other parts and the Semitic religions that have been the source of most of our major religions, uh, even Christianity really had its start from the Semitic peoples. Um, the other thing too is that I've noticed in my living in the East and the West is that a strange balance that's actually coming into a harmony that wasn't there when I started these searches going to India in 1980 is that I came growing up in the West. I, of course, grew up with Christianity and Judaism and Muslims and all of that. But I find that there's a simplicity in Western religions that seems to counterbalance the West's domination in complex technology. And when I went at the time I was going into Asia, which changed a lot since 1980, I noticed that in India, everything, the religions were remarkably sophisticated, but people lived in mess and crowds and not a lot of technology that was even created by them, but they started to learn and they started in all the times I would visit India. I saw India rapidly change. And until now, especially in the cities, it's just as Western as anywhere else. And so there's been a blending of that. And of course, certainly a lot of people in the United States in the 60s were influenced by Eastern teachers, Bhagwan, Osho being mine, that also changed the way we look at religions and made it a little more richer in that. So, have we got anybody waiting for a question to ask
Well,
a question?
there was two polls that I created, and it's interesting the data
Ah,
of the poll. So the first poll was dealing with the Tomahawks. Would they be sent to Ukraine? So 60% of 10 voters, it's a big sample size, right?
six,
But
yeah.
60% thought that the Tomahawks would be sent. 40% thought that they would not be. And then the other poll was about would the Gazan ceasefire remain? 90% say no.
Yeah, I agree with the 90%. You were voicing your concerns 2 weeks ago about
Yeah.
how this thing might end up not working well, or if you
Well,
could
let me
refresh our minds about what you said then.
yeah, let me expand on it. So I was concerned that the ceasefire was being pushed too fast by Trump's administration and that it coincides with my big worry in 2026
Yeah.
because Rosh Hashanah will coincide with the Shabbos, and you cannot blow the shofar on Shabbos.
No.
And that is usually a sign where there is a curse that comes. Now, the reason why the curse comes is you can't silence Satan or Satan. You can't silence the great prosecutor with when you don't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. So I feel as though a false peace was being orchestrated, and that what will happen is that the peace will collapse, and that there will be a curse on the earth. I know this sounds, a bit brimstone-ish, but I feel that on September 11th of 2026, that's the start of a curse on the earth that will last until October of 2027.
Yeah.
And I just feel as though it's starting to build up. There's not, and that curse doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to be in that region. It could be a flare up with Taiwan. It could be a combination of a three-front theater where you have it in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in Asia. It could be just Asia. I'm not sure. It could be, I mean, there was news just today about Kash Patel talking about that they found some sort of hunting stand. Have you heard about this at all?
Mm-mm.
Maybe. Okay. So they found some sort of hunting stand that was that was near Air Force One when they parked the plane. How this could happen, I have no idea. So
Now, a hunting stand, is that what was it with a gun
that's
or?
my understanding is a hunting stand is like you put that in a tree and you're like gonna shoot deer in the forest.
Oh,
Now I could be wrong, but so they just discovered this, I thought today. So, and well, wait a minute here. This is like, this is one step closer to another assassination attempt.
yeah.
So,
Well, the
and
danger is very high,
yeah,
and no one in power that has been shot at is
well, I take it one
protected
step
by
further.
this.
I take it one step. Even though Netanyahu, I'm not a big fan of Netanyahu,
Yeah.
but even though Netanyahu says all these niceties about Trump, there are people within the Zionist community, all right, do not want peace in the Middle East. All right. And if, I don't know if it's true or not, but let's just assume it is true that the Israelis were complicit in the assassination attempt with JFK. If
Mm,
that is true, then, because JFK, for the ones that don't know, wanted to investigate the power plant, the nuclear power plant, to understand, where they were at with their technological advancement in nuclear weapons.
yeah.
And then shortly after he wanted that investigation, he was assassinated. Now, is that coincidental? Maybe, maybe
Could
not. But
be.
let's just assume that they were a part of it. If they were a part of it, for that, there is no doubt in my mind that they would do the same thing to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, that's why he's looking over his
And then
shoulder,
and this is a
and
Jewish guy that is saying this. So I mean, so the point. So my concern here is that Trump, by pushing for peace with Kushner and some alignment with the Saudis and some of the other major players of the region uh, like the UAE and others, I would I'm very concerned about the safety of the president of the United States.
yeah, I am too. It's not. It'll never be over, even after he's retired. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's sad, but this is the situation. And there are a couple attempts already. And the other thing too is that what he may do, some of the speculation that some of my sources have been doing, some interesting speculations, is putting out the possibility that because all Trump needs to do if he really wants to make peace and end this thing and get himself in that kind of trouble is to call up Benny Gantz. who used to be an Israeli prime minister, who used to be in this government, but left early when the genocide started. And he's right wing in ways he might be the same as Netanyahu, but not as crazy about it. But he could call him up and say, Benny, um, you're the designated next prime minister. And you must, we'll pull all of our energy out of this, Israel. You must get back into Netanyahu's government. And then when you're there, you make a deal, you pardon him, you exile him to the United States, and he'll be okay there. Won't, he'll be able to live out his days, and his son's already living there, avoiding the draft and avoiding his responsibilities to go to war in Gaza, as all youth in Israel have to do, serve. And he's been buying up these properties, and they can live and with their ill-gotten gains and be fine, and nobody will go after them, and it's all done. But then you become the prime minister, and then we resume trying to really make peace here, and then you're in trouble. I mean, I'm adding that just from what you're saying.
Mm.
And the other thing too, it doesn't have to even be that. It can be illness. I don't think Donald Trump is going to be able to finish his term at the rate that he's declining. It's a kind of hard one unless you know the signs. He's sometimes he's still full energy and stuff like that, but he's not the person that he was
Dude,
March.
I picked up on that too. He's lost
He's
stuff.
lost something.
Yeah,
And
no,
he's is monotone. In fact, some of my other sources, like Larry Johnson, who used to be a CIA guy in Central America, and very very good source for a lot of that stuff. He has people who worked with Trump during the campaign, and he's told the story a few times where he says, I hadn't seen him for a few months, come back, and he's not the same guy. He's not the same guy. Something's lost, something gone. I had the
mm,
same feeling in March of this year. I said, something's happened to the president. He maybe had a stroke or something, a small stroke, didn't to stop anything he was doing, but something sagged in his brain. Man,
well, I mean, a lot of people, once they hit, 76, 78, especially if they're overweight, they don't really take care of their body or what they eat.
don't
My
exercise.
understanding, right? My understanding, he loves fast food.
He
So
lives
I've
on
been,
it.
so I I've noticed that his posture is different.
Do you see how
He,
he's leaning forward?
yep, yep.
That's an
So
Alzheimer's sign.
he's also he's leaning forward, and it almost looks like his vertebrae are compressed. He looks shorter
Mm-hmm.
compared to his first term. He
Well,
is.
he's getting old. He's got to hold up that huge body of his.
Well, the
And
thing is that once a male, especially if they haven't been taking care of themselves, once they hit to about 76, 78, aging accelerates.
yeah,
Aging's not linear. It's
no.
non-linear. A lot of people don't understand this.
I mean, it goes in waves.
Yeah,
My
right. And
my beard
then
went really white really fast in 2 years, and now it seems to be stable again. But I've studied it that people now I'm getting into my 70s. People have these points where it accelerates and it tables out a bit, plateaus out, and then goes again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you might see with a geriatric patient where it's almost like a wire that's starting to fuse out.
Yeah.
So there was these moments of time where there's conductivity, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it starts like sparking,
Mhm.
or like or fusing out, and then it's okay again, and then it starts
Yeah.
fusing out some more.
Yeah.
And literally what it is the neurons have a myelin sheath around them,
Right.
and for good conductivity of a neuron, you have to have a healthy myelin sheath, and that allows for this electrical pulse to go through. But
Yeah.
once that myelin sheath starts to degrade, just like a piece of wire where the coating is taken off, it could spark or fray or whatever. It's the same thing in the brain. So over time, these myelin sheaths start to fray or build a plaque where they're not working properly. So yeah, he's aging. There's no doubt he's aging. But I would say that I don't know if he's aging any faster than a normal geriatric patient of his age.
Well, I don't know, but he's got a lot more stress than most of them have. And he used to thrive on the stress when he was younger, but he's one of those high energy guys. My father was like that. He was very high energy, but so he would just push through. And then when all that started to fall apart, he literally fell apart in 3 years and died at the age of 71, looking 91.
I mean, the question is, will Trump slowly decline or will it be a sharp decline? I don't know. I mean,
well, the only thing I can do is look at the history of his family and his sister, because that would be a direct genetic. He's part of the siblings more than the parents even. So at least that's the way my mind thinks of it. But I also recollect that his father, I think, started later. I mean, here's the situation. He is technically halfway. Well, he is actually approaching. No, let's see. Um, everybody says he became president officially at 79 in January. But I always look at it like, but I'm supposed to be 69 officially. On October 29th, I finished my 70th year, and suddenly I'm 70, but I'm really starting the 71st year.
right,
That's how I see it.
right.
So, if you look at this 4 year pushing him ahead towards that Alzheimer's window of his family, it's brought him a lot closer in the second term to the time when it started showing up in his siblings and his family. And uh, I mean, what happened with his father is it kind of came on fast, but then he was still physically vital. And I mean, he'd do things where he'd be in his wife had go to work. You're driving me crazy, just go to work and drive them crazy, because he didn't want to be at home and all that. So he'd be in the limousine, and suddenly he would just think, "Gotta get out of the limousine and go walk down the street in New York City." So his dad, Frank, would do stuff like that. And it's really telling how this whole kind of childlike thing about I've stopped 8 wars, 9 wars, and he's talking about things that never happened, that he never did. That started in the last month or so. That he's starting to tell elaborate stories, and it sort of reminds me of Biden saying, "Well, his son died in Iraq," which he didn't.
You want to
And
hear a
even
story?
in speeches, and my son gave his life in Iraq. He
Let me
means
tell
it,
you.
but
Let me tell you a story that I have not told anybody in a long, long time. The first time that I noticed that my grandfather on my mother's side started having cognitive decline was we were at a Big Boys. You know what Big Boys is?
oh, sure, it's the hamburger guy,
Yeah. All right.
Bob's Big Boy.
We were at Big Boys on a weekend, and that they have this a breakfast buffet type
Right.
thing. All right, and he was complaining to the waitress that the toast wasn't what he remembers the toast should be, and it was literally what he took was French toast, but he was complaining the French toast wasn't, and he wanted toast. Right? And so this is like, and he couldn't distinguish between French toast and regular toast.
You put pancake
He was
syrup on the
already in
toast. What are you
he was
doing?
already in his 70s when it happening when he was But this guy was always working. He was a CB in the Navy during World War II, and
Wow.
this guy was, you know, this guy could build and blow up anything. But the thing is that was probably my first memory of seeing someone really have cognitive decline.
Mm,
And so this was he was just turning, 70, 71 when this is happening.
mm.
But yeah,
Work too
it's
hard.
sad to see. It's sad to see.
Yeah.
With my father, I started noticing that his writing ability started to decline, and then he started stuttering. He was having problems finding words. He was losing his thought. He would repeat himself.
Mm.
But it started with he used to write very fluent, and it was just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and just a regular email. And it just, instead of 4 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs, it ended up being 2, and each paragraph was shorter, and the sentence structure was just not as tight as it used to be, and then it was just sentences that were all garbled, and you could see it. You could see in how it was changing. It was almost like he was slowly drifting away.
It's interesting in a study of meditation that, yeah, I've encountered people in India and stuff that were really old, but they'd been meditating all their life, and they seemed to be still had a clarity. You know,
Do you
maybe
think?
they were shaking a little from their body being weak, but the mind was still sharp.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen
and I
it's.
wonder sometimes.
I've
Hopefully,
seen.
it'll work for me.
No, no, there is something about that, and I just have a hypothesis. I don't know
Okay.
if it's true or not, but I think it has something to do with when individuals are praying, they are they're creating a harmonic,
Mhm.
all right, and so by creating that harmonic, it's vibrating the skull and that cavity, and I think it's helping somehow the health of the neurons with that vibration of when they're doing a prayer, and it's like
Yes.
I'm just going to mimic it. It's not a prayer. I'm just mimicking
Uh,
it. It's like
yeah. Yes.
and it's creating a vibration in the cavity of the
Yeah.
skull.
Well, I used to do for 6 months not Osho's Nata Brahma meditation, which is Tibetan humming.
Yeah.
And I did it in some of the ways he did it, but he talked also about how the Tibetans used to do it in the middle of the night. They would get out of their bed and sit there, and for 40 minutes they would go, mm, 40 minutes. So you go deeper and deeper into it. See, it's already changed the
Hmm.
situation. And when you're going, there's a very beautiful thing that comes on its own accord. It's not something to be sought, but one moment you're doing the humming, and then the next moment you feel like all the existence is humming you. And there are things in meditation and yoga and things like that that I do think create more longevity in people's synapses and things. I also have noticed that listening to, in my case, classical music, because I was an opera singer,
Hmm.
but good music, beautiful music that sends you into an ecstatic state, is the endorphins can literally, you can take them and bathe your whole body with the love of them. And it just, you become a vibratory melt in. And so, and I do feel that it has reinvigorated my body. I can feel the changes. So, you know, since so much religion has music and meditation, things going on in it, I think that there's something there about this in my own experiences of it. Because, I still have, I could write another 80 books. I've written 53. written thousands of articles. I could write another 83 books, but when I got into my late 60s, I started to say, well, I am following the genetics and all. I think I can be pretty assured of one last good 10-year period before things are delayed or slowed down either by mental infirmary ended or health problems of getting older. So I have made a bucket list of the things that I want to have finished before 10 years have passed, before I'm 80 or 81. Uh, my mother was vital right up to her 80th year, and then her final 7 years was going into Parkinson's, having heart valves opened, and although her heart was very healthy, but the veins and the arteries were clogged, and then she had Parkinson's dementia, which is fortunate because it didn't take her mind away. She was there. She was be able to converse. It was slower and all, but she was there right to the end. In fact, when she was consciously dying, the Parkinson's dropped away and she was speaking normally. And
Really?
yeah, I was so there are some very mysterious because she was also a disciple of Osho and also a meditator. So, and then she consciously died. She said, "No more water, no more food. I just want to lay here and work on my death and just be there." And she died ecstatically. Um, it's so amazing to see she didn't shake anymore. It just stopped. I can't explain it. I was her nurse for a long time. And so there are so many things in this modern society that are toxic in vibratory sense, in diet, in the things people watch, that I I am not surprised to see a great increase in cognitive decline coming early. A lot of the things that are going on, I look at some studies of it in my studies of everything I study about what's going on in the world. And it's problems with diet and all of that is all consequential in seeing it seems I mean, I grew up when in the United States where it was rare to see a fat man.
Yeah.
I was just look at this guy one time in Redondo Beach in a barber's chair. And I was looking through the window and he was so huge. And I was like, what happened to him? And now I find it hard to find anybody who's not obese.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean, when I was a kid, I didn't know any of my classmates that were overweight. They were
yeah,
all normal weight.
yeah,
Some were thinner than others or more
yeah,
muscular than others, but they were all within a good BMI.
yeah.
Now, I would say the only people that I would say that were tipping to a 25 BMI maybe would have been a lineman football player.
Yeah.
But that was like borderline BMI 25. Nowadays, you have children that are age 12 to 14, 15 years old that are already obese. And
They're not
that,
going to survive long.
right.
They're not, or they're going to end up a cripple in some kind
Right.
of way before, long before they are old.
Right.
Yes, even in my town today, I'm just amazed. And the other thing I'm amazed at is people slug around half awake. I never saw people acting like that when I was growing up, where you have to kind of wait for people who are not old and senile, but like in their 30s, and they're just like looking at something completely unaware of their surroundings. And you kind of have to go because they're blocking the supermarket aisle because their girth is, and it's just like I don't remember those experiences happening until about the last 30 years. And then I started seeing it everywhere. So,
Yeah, I mean, you have it's a combination of the obesity issue, and then you couple that with the overuse of technology and the
yes,
dumbing of the society with the social media. People are not reading. literacy rates are going down.
Well,
Um, it's the attention span for most individuals are like a gnat.
it's terrible.
It's not
I
even
mean,
it's not even a goldfish, it's a gnat.
well, I've noticed that I can see that a lot of people who read have lost the attention span to really look at a produced long sentence like Tolstoy or something like that, where it keeps the thread. You
Yeah.
know, where I had one person who edited f for me sometimes, and he couldn't. Uh, he had to have me break down the sentences into shorter sentences, and it really felt more that his ability to hold the thought was really the problem.
Right.
And although, there are times where Bradburyans, concise, thin, 1, 2 line paragraphs are wonderful, and I use them too, but there are some complex things that require you keep the thread, but it can be a long sentence. And um, yeah, so it, the, very interesting thing I'm going to write about it because it's just really happened. I had a month ago, a breakthrough in my Nostradamus project where I started to find a way to train the artificial intelligence to improve upon its translation of 16th century French. And what then happened is what happened was, long story short, and I think it's very important, there are master-slave relationships that are absolutely right. And that is not with living people, but with machines. AI, we are the masters. AI is the servant. Never let it go the other way around like most people are doing, letting AI do all the thinking for you. I do the thinking to my AI. I tell it what I want, and I don't tolerate it presuming to go somewhere else I do not want to go. I am the master. And I think human beings have to start thinking that way. You know, the what's really happening is a repeat of Shelley's Frankenstein monster, the Prometheus, the new Prometheus. Her novel is prophetic. Dr. Frankenstein is completely unaware of his ego and that he's trying to play God, creating a new life. What a conceit. And he creates a monster. And eventually, he and his monster destroys him and destroys himself. And AI, it's not how AI that's the problem. It's how human beings are not proclaiming their mastery over their servant machines. These machines are not alive. You can make him look even more alive than you, but he has no soul. These machines are machines. And I would say it's not healthy to try to make them look too human because then the human mind and its egos gets lost in this idea that maybe we even have to give them rights. These are unalive machines. Are you going to give human rights to your car? Are you going to take your self-heating toilet to a university? It's like, no, these are machines. And if you make them look and act like living people, well, if I had am I going to take a doll in and say, give him a job? No. Human beings must be the masters of their machines, or they will be destroyed. It's the most dangerous thing out there. Many dangers, global warming, other things, which really is there. I've been watching it for 50 years. World War III, all these things are dangers, but the greatest danger is when people literally, I'm watching people surrender their muscle brain power to the machines. But what
You're
I've
saying
done,
that
well, just as a quick point, what I have managed to do, because I'm the master of the artificial intelligence, I've made it do and change my work in translating and checking my 16th century French meanings because I'm the conscious person that is knows where to go, knows the right questions to ask because I've been doing French 16th century for 50 years. The human being as the master in this whole wealth of AI stored information, Dr. No from AI, that it hastens my ability to get the information that I need because I also know it. I read. I've spent a life as a scholar, so I know when it's telling me the truth or when it's not. I know when it's going astray. If you surrender that by not studying and not using your mind and not writing and doing all these things or singing and keeping tactile, you will be too dull to get anything more than what the machine will mirror back at you, your dullness, because
Mm,
you've lost your mastery of it.
right. What's happening is in future generations, and even in the younger generation that's already in school, they don't have the attention span to learn the subject matters,
No.
to be knowledgeable enough to have discernment. So now now with these individuals, they push a button, they want an immediate answer, immediate gratification,
Yeah.
and they don't have the discernment. So when something that someone that's knowledgeable can see that it's fake, what's happening now with AI is that they actually impose. They're asking Grok if it's a real story. So so they're now going to the AI going, Mother, is this real? Right?
Yes, it
And
is. It is real.
right. So it's going to get to a point where they're just going to automatically rely on Big Brother or Little Sister to give them the
Yeah.
answer, and
Yeah.
they're
Big
not going
brother
to
knows. Yeah.
they're not going to have critical thinking skills are really going to go down.
My father said something very sage, and he wasn't an intellectual kind of guy, but I thought he's a down to earth Taurus kind of guy. But he says the most important thing you can learn from school is study habits,
Yeah.
how to study, how to learn. And then you can apply that to whatever you need to learn. And, it seems like our schools have failed in that. I mean, I watched out when after Charlie Kirk was shot, I watched maybe 20 hours of all of his gotcha one-on-one debates, prove me wrong. And I do a whole thing on all of that, where I put myself in the position of that person, a thinking person, somebody, an undergrad that has not had his parents waste their fortune teaching him to be stupid. I had a sense of that even when I ended high school. I said, I am not going to college. Fortunately, I almost went to USC on a music scholarship. I won the music scholarship, but in that same week, I was also being auditioned to become a protege of a major New York City opera baritone, Bill Chapman, who was the protege of Lawrence Melchior, the Wagnerian Danish tenor. And I thought, if I'm going to be an opera singer, I'm not going to have a backup plan. I'm going to be a journeyman. I'm going to do not just maybe 2 or 3 operas each year in a USC opera production, but do 30 and learn my craft. And if you don't put your whole self into it, you're probably not going to succeed. I could have succeeded. I left opera not because I wasn't succeeding. I just wasn't good at the politics. And I had to kind of step back and critically think about that and say, you know what? I'm just not good at being a bullshit artist. I'm just the way you got to do it to kiss the butt of somebody to get something. The more I tried it, and you could see that because I didn't do the game right, they were even more insulted. So I realized I'm not good at this. So I went back to something that was always my first calling. That was when I was 8, I wanted to be a writer, and I am now a writer. So
So is OSHA, was OSHA before or after the opera training?
he was after. In
After.
fact, in fact, I would say my leaving opera, it was nice. My parents, I'd worked very hard, in classical artists, you work, it's a total commitment. And when I realized that it was quite dramatic how it all ended. I mean, I was going to Long Beach State as a professional opera singer, journeyman kind of guy, to get the chance to do larger roles that my talents, the college kids didn't have it. So I play Figaro in the Nozze di Figaro by Mozart. It was my last production. And I was in this production where for a month, a smaller theater, the college professor who was the director, was stage managing and getting everything together. And I kept asking him because he'd never say anything to me. He's, well, how's it going? Do you have any advice for me or something I need to do? Oh, no, no, you're just fine. You're just fine. Kind of half bored. And then when he got into the dress rehearsals, he freaked out because his entire plan on his little wallpaper theater stage didn't work at all on the big theater. Now, my God, you'd think a professor would know better, but he obviously was, he was never went and did it. He teached, the old idea, if you're talent, you do it, and if you don't have talent, you teach it in opera and stuff like that. And he was the epitome of that, I discovered. And then what he would do is that he had this thing where he wouldn't tell anybody what was wrong, but then he would suddenly, when he's panicking, he'd take a person aside, even publicly, and just take them apart in front of everybody. You're just not, you haven't been doing anything right for the last month. Now, in the politics of being a student, yes, master, yes, master. But as your heart is breaking. But he did a really dumb move. I might have looked like I was around the same age as these other college kids, but he made the mistake of playing that one on me. And I put him down Scorpio wise, double Scorpio sting sting. Um, I mean, I got coldly angry with his hypocrisy, and even at one point he had another teacher helping him get out of his own problem. I actually walked up, right in the corner where the seats were. I walked right up into his face and to the lady, saying, "Is this how you do it? You can't do it. You always have to get yourself out of a problem that you create." you know and I mean, it was one of those feelings like where I felt like, and it's happened in my life before, where I became kind of a vehicle of retribution, somebody who earned this over years of bullying kids and stuff, and little power trip, and I just ripped him a new one and made it very public. And I mean, it's like I was fed up with the whole scene. And so it's funny because it's one of the few times my mom came to the rehearsal. She used to be a dancer and a singer, so she came to the rehearsal. And so what happened was, because he said, you're a crappy singer, you're crappy this and that. And so I stood there before opening these big tall doors, just before the orchestra pit. And I said very loudly for all the people listening, well, if you think that I'm a crappy singer, then you are certainly a crappy director. And then I opened the door things, and she went out before me, and then I slammed them. I could hear the bows bouncing in the orchestra pit from the violinist. People, I mean, like that, like a thunderous ending of my career. And then what happened is Bill, who had his struggles, because I love Bill. He was like a second father to me, Bill Chapman, and he was an amazing man, an amazing singer, and a great. It was really the side of a father that I never had. He was my second father, where you had a manly man. He was also born on the 30th of April, a different year, just like my father. So he's even the Taurus, and well, and and I'm a Scorpio, so there's an attraction. It can be opposites and attractions when you're in opposite sign. There was magic there, and he was also a person who struggled with the politics and the and the crappy people that got there because they kissed the right ass and maybe did more than that. And um, he so he had been tried to be a go-between to reconcile what had happened. And because we're about to go on the show, and I was the only guy who could really sing it. I mean, in a way, what I learned in my power was that I can walk away, which is a great power. When your freedom and your integrity is being challenged by people. I use it all the time in all the hundreds of documentaries I've done. When a person just doesn't want to pay, I say, well, I have the power to walk away, but you, Mr. Director, don't have time to have your brother-in-law go down to the LA library and try to become a Nostradamus expert in an afternoon. I've been doing this 50 years. And when you pay me my per diem, you are paying for time you do not have. You can ask me a question any day or time of the day or night in pre and post production, and in 5 minutes, I get back to you. It's something that you wouldn't find in 5 years, and you don't have 5 years. So my door's open. I'm cool with it. I mean, you're probably going to spend that extra amount of money on your date tonight. So my door is open. I imagine about 2 weeks you're going to be coming to call. And if you don't take me on these terms, it'll be twice as much when you call, but I'll come and save your show. I think 2 weeks later he called and said, okay, it's twice as much now. That's the payment for my troubles with you. And and these were some major productions that I did. And so I kind of learned that in that experience. I learned that there's a great freedom and power of walking away. And so I walked away from my opera career, but I think I gained something far more valuable than an opera career. It was this. And so anyway, Bill was trying to reconcile a situation between the director and the conductor, who was also an idiot. I liked him, but this conductor didn't know how to conduct for opera. He'd take his baton. He had this ego trip that he wanted everybody to stop doing their acting and just stare at him and sing at him. And he would do things, and rather than, if you're down the pit and you're up on the stage, you can't look straight at that white baton. So if you a real opera conductor, you do this, you don't do foreshortened this. You can't see that unless you stop your acting and you're looking down like some boob. And so this guy was, and one time with the orchestra in the Mike Fink, I did Mike Fink. I was the lead in that, and it was a really great American opera. The wife of the composer told me she saw it, and she said, she was a widow. She said, I think my husband would have loved you as Mike Fink, and that was just really beautiful. Mike Fink was a friend of Daniel Boone. He was a riverboatman. Yeah, had some beautiful, beautiful. It's a beautiful opera, not well known. But anyway, at one point he said, well, he's an Austrian guy. He says, well, I think it's almost good. And the whole orchestra went, oh, all these kids. Come on. So anyway, I was dealing with these kinds of directorial talents, and so Bill came back and told me, well, they want it all. They are not taking any responsibility for anything. They want you to publicly be contritious and apologize and beg them to come back and do the show. And I said to Bill, call them back and tell them I am not coming back. And it was like, not just for that, but for opera, I'm not coming back. If this is what I have to deal with in the joys of performing all this crap, then I'd rather deal with my own issues alone before an empty page or computer screen writing and have control of my own art and be responsible for it. And so I remember I hung up the phone, my parents are watching, And it was this point where I was going into a nervous breakdown, but I was observing it. It was like, ooh, down, 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 down. Oh, here's where suicide would happen. Ooh, down, 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 down. Here's where crying stopped and pain. And then, ooh, and sadness brought me to this remarkable depth, vastness. The pain was gone. I just kept going down forever to where all that surface stuff of the ego and the breakdown, all that just didn't matter anymore. And what I ended up settling into something profound to my path that eventually led to India was it's true what Osho says that happiness is never deep. Sadness can take you to profound depths of existence. And I accidentally through this had it happen. And it was just phenomenal. And because they were watching me going through this, my parents said, son, you've been working so hard and we've got some money. And so why don't you just take a break for a few years and just be. And so I had the time and the place as this all settled. It settled pretty fast. When you do things totally, they settle pretty fast. And and then I started to feel that I started to come back into my interest in prophecy and interest in understanding. I mean, I studied history voraciously since I was end of my 6th year, and the Cuban Missile Crisis kind of shocked me into wanting to know how we got here and what all this is about. And so I started voraciously reading thousands of books of history of this, history of that. And I started seeing in the history patterns that people keep repeating the patterns. And they're the same patterns in different costumes and different religious veneers and all of that. But there's this predictability that, and then I came to understand that prophecy is the science, the search of predictability, which is mediocre, which is always unconscious. Spontaneous people are unpredictable. Intelligence is unpredictable. Genius is unpredictable. But the way most people have lived their lives in all the civilizations is just kind of beasts of burden and being very predictable. Wars happen in the same predictable ways, etc. Then I started to read after the breakthrough. I started to read, I tried to understand, well, if the past history is like that, what about future history in prophecy? Is the same pattern happening? So I started studying thousands of books on hundreds of prophets and study because I was getting more and more interested in Nostradamus as the core of that. And and then I saw there was the same repetition. That brought me into a confrontation with the thing that I truly am in this work, my work with the past history context, my work with the future history potentials is really about taking people and their fascination with the future and taking them all the way in so they can come out the other side in the eternity of the present where genius always dwells and it's spontaneous and intelligent. Everybody was born, everybody's soul born in these bodies came here as some kind of unique genius. And in that innocence, our priests, politicians, pedagogues, and parents have taken our have programmed us to survive in this mind amplified world, identity amplified world. And then that process, no, none of us has lost this genius. It's right there. But the thing that has been replacing it is a wandering to find something that you are. And if you're looking for it outside of yourself, you will never find it. The thing that you lost as a child, the innocence, the innocence. And so, and I also think because suddenly I'm really alive now, suddenly everything's snapping, the synapses are working, I'm observing all of this as a meditator. This is the kind of thing, this is where people get dull, is I mean, I'm inspired. It's lit me to tell the story has changed the whole mood. You can all feel it. Those of you who have sensitivity, you can feel it. Um, these are the things that keep you young. The other thing too is that I'll close with this because we're past 9 or whatever time it is out there. Is that um, I'm coming to notice in my meditations, I've been doing it a long time now, since I was 21, and then went to a master and went very deep into it. Um, is that I'm finding that there's a subtle way. Things get subtler and subtler with the mind. And I'm finding that there's times when I can see where my mind is wanting to make me do the things I did before. And I'll kind of just be still and not be able to think what to do next. And it's not a cognitive moment. I'm watching the mind kind of going tilt because it's not the master anymore. It's not like a machine. The machine is not running me anymore. So I simply wait. And then suddenly I, everything goes pop, 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 and it all works. Like I'm going, okay, oh, it's there. But do this, boom, 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 boom. And I just, rather than fight it, I simply allow it to be that way, where it just seems like the mind's wanting to claim its domination back as the center rather than the servant of me. So sometimes I used to get concerned, am I having my problems, is it beginning? But I was watching it. I wasn't, I knew that the French toast was not the same toast. you know. So, but why was I having a problem with that? You know? And so, what I found, which is remarkable, is I'm relearning how to use the mind. I'm relearning how it works when it's a servant. You don't have to push it. That's a subtle residue of the ego habit. Just wait. And suddenly there it is. And it's working. It goes there. Oh, and then I'm fine. Suddenly I'm effortless. Things are happening. But I'm learning it. It's like I've gotten to a stage in meditation where I have to, uh, I have this last little struggle with the mind wanting to be in control. Uh, so like in that last session there, that was all just easy, spontaneous, because I was in that space. So I wanted to share that with you all.
Well, we've reached that time to wrap it up, but before we do, I'd like to remind the audience in the description of this video and all the videos I've done with John, there's a link to take you to his website. Please click that link and you can sign up for a periodical or a reading. So, John, if you can quickly describe what those are so the audience could help support your work.
I'm creating 9 articles for my zine, my e-zine, the Hogue Prophecy Report, that I've just been starting to do final read-throughs of it. I've been working on it with other projects for about the last 3 weeks, and sometimes when you're a writer, you go, well, it feels pretty good what I'm doing, and you kind of keep yourself skeptical and say, well, we'll see when I read it again. But sometimes you go, my God, it's even better than I thought. And there is so much wealth of information and sharing in these articles. I mean, the they are about, it's 9 articles. The first article is a Civil War report, and it looks at the life and influence of John Brown as a catalyst for the hot Civil War of the 1860s. And so I kind of are following a kind of scholarly but storytelling rich way of doing it. It worked, with chapter and verse and notes and stuff like that. But I keep those just enough to see the reference, but not overly scholarly. Um, so a balance, because it's important to be a conversationalist and not just I have to read the dry scholars. You don't. so that I can make it interesting. So that's the first one about him. And then in part two of the Civil War report, the second article, I talk about um, that in these are both parallel stories about civil wars that happen and may be starting. Only this one's cold, like a Cold War. And they're starting because of two Christian evangelical people who acted, and one ended up dying from the neck, being hung, and the next one, 160 some years later, ended up dying, being shot through the neck. Kind of interesting. And that's Charlie Kirk. So it's full spectrum. The third article is about Christian nationalism and Charlie Kirk. And that's where I go in all those. I said, there's something just fundamentally, there's something that's odd about this guy that just, I can't quite grasp it. So I watched all of his debates, hours of it. And then I saw that he thinks, even I thought at first that he was a Socratic debater. Um, but actually, he's a sophist, just like the people that Socrates competed with in his Socratic method, which is, see, a sophist is a propagandist. He wants to convince you that his idea is right and make you a convert. So isn't it a wonder? It's no wonder that somebody who is a Christian evangelist is going to be more like a sophist than Socrates, who would like say, well, I doubt what you said. And then he would say kindly, as the interlocutory debates with the partner, a person that's a partner, somebody's there to share himself, to be a catalyst, to ask questions and see. So, so the guy said, well, I doubt what you're saying. And I said, is that negative or positive, your doubt? And I was like, well, no, it's negative. I says, are you aware that the word doubt doesn't have a negative connotation? No. What is the connotation? Doubt in its roots, Indo-European roots, means to hover between two possibilities. In this way, it's very similar to the true meaning of skeptic, which most people also abuse. They see it in a cynical way. Well, I'm skeptical. There's something wrong with your story, which implies unconsciously that they already have a conclusion and they're going to investigate and make sure that unconsciously their conclusion is right. Because what else can happen if you start an investigation with your conclusion already made? How can you not help but unconsciously find exactly what you're looking for? Well, that's an interesting thought, says the interlocutor. So what you're saying is that to doubt is to not have a conclusion. Yes, because then you will hover between all the possibilities, and then in its own good time, you will find whether it's true or not. So that's more of Socratic. I go a little longer in that in what I say, but it's the Socratic approach. Now, Socrates was very kind and compassionate with it. Um, and even so, he also ended up being forced to drink poison or leave Athens, which he didn't want to do, because of his making people look at what's kindly, but pointing out where people assume certain meanings in things or do certain things that are unconscious. And for somebody who's seeking, that is helpful. Thank God I ran into you. But for people who are in their egos, they feel angry. They feel foolish. How dare you make me feel like I'm a fool? Well, if I were going to do Socratic on that, I would say, you've come to that conclusion that you're a fool. I didn't call you a fool. I just pointed out that we humans have, a lot of ways in which we presume things. And it would be better for our knowledge and wisdom to see how that works so that when we seek to know, we truly find things to know rather than spend a whole lot. Maybe what I did, you're angry about it, but maybe it's a beautiful thing. Maybe you won't, you think yourself as a fool. Well, maybe you won't be anymore. You see? But that, if but Socrates was poisoned because of that. So so anyway, there's a lot of other things in this. There's I'm talk about the Tomahawks for all you people that did the study in it. I go into it deeply. I do a two-part series of Brace for Impact, followed by Brace for Peace pacts, and looking at whether this thing is going to end up in a peaceful solution over the Tomahawks and so forth. So, you know, I'm certainly having a lot of fun doing final edits on it in a way that I haven't before. So really, it'd be a great time to consider go to my website, hogueprophecy.com. You'll see the link for it. And when you get there, you'll see two things. You'll see free samples of the articles that I put together in the Hogue Prophecy Report, usually one full article or one and a half, and then some excerpts of all the others. And then there's a little link at the beginning with the green eye as well, a box where you can click on that to join, or later I give you three options for payment, and you will then receive usually it's every few months, because what I do is I see a certain situation of the present trends, and then see, I'm not writing a daily thing about daily stuff. I'm writing about what comes next. So, so I I'm not constantly writing you like many people are. I'm writing you every few months, but it goes deep. And you can become a subscriber for $60 a year. It's $5 a year, only $5 a year. You can also, and one of the other options is you can start an automatic payment for $5 each month, and that can last as long as you like. Or you can just be a further sampler of the whole thing by every once in a while. I have many people that do this, who for $5 or a little more, they just get the current full easing the report to read. And then if they want to join, they can do that. So those are the options. Um, it's one of the primary ways that I scratch out a living. So if you please check out these samples of the many articles that I've left in the sampling box, and at any time if you feel yes to get the whole story, the full iceberg, not just the tip, then do become a subscriber. Also, at the top of my website, you will see something that where I can talk about your future in a one-on-one and its potentials on a one-on-one reading that usually is about 2.5 hours and around 5 p.m. in Pacific, although there's instructions on other times that work for wherever you are in the world. And you'll see me right here in my office, and I will start with a Kelly Blue Book design of your body mind vehicle in astrology. What makes your vehicle work? What makes it challenged? How you can balance it through your oppositions? All of that. And then what I will do is the Osho Zen Tarot deck, my master's tarot deck, which is quite remarkable. And we will go deeper into the situation. And it's also basically a trance empathic reading. So it's lots of fun. Time goes by very fast, and I'd love to meet you and share energy with you and perhaps insights that might interest you. And thank you for staying with us all this time for this interview, this show. More and more people are telling me about how they've seen our shows. And thank you for taking your precious time to listen to me. And I love you.
All right. I just want to remind the audience, please click the link in the description of this video to get to John's website, and please sign up for his periodical and do a reading. So, John, say goodbye to everybody before we sign off here.
Goodbye to everybody.
All right, let me log off here. Hold on.